There's much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Max Blumenthal is a best-selling author, journalist, and the founder and editor of GrayZoneProject.com. With us from Miami is award-winning journalist Maria Elvira Salazar. She interviewed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro last month. Francisco Marquez is a Venezuelan lawyer and activist. He was imprisoned by the Maduro government and currently serves as the chief of staff to Juan Guaido's representative to the Organization of American States. And joining us from Caracas is TeleSur news anchor Ray Gomez. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Let's start in Caracas with Ray Gomez. And Ray, right now we seem to have a standoff between those who support the president, President Nicolas Maduro, and those who support the opposition leader, Juan Guaido. As we've been reporting, one senior military commander, an Air Force commander, has broken ranks with Maduro, and he's now calling on the rest of the military to join him in supporting Guaido. So where do you see this going?
Hello, how are you? Wes, you're right. There are different groups that are supporting either President Maduro or Juan Guaido. But the truth is that President Maduro has been overseeing during these days the troops, the FAM, the armed forces here in Venezuela. And as we can see, the most of the military have expressed, have reaffirmed their loyalty to President Maduro. They have reaffirmed that by saying the slogan, loyal, always loyal, never traitors. And it comes, or it is part of military exercises and military practices that have been taking place during these days and are going to continue from the 10th to the 15th of February. An homage of the 200th anniversary of the bicentennial of the Congress of Angostura. It is a very symbolic date here in Venezuela for all the Venezuelans because it is related to the speech that the liberator Simón Bolívar has pronounced 200 years ago.
Right.
And in this context, the military forces have been practicing, have been reaffirming their loyalty to President Maduro.
All right, Francisco, you are Venezuelan. You are a Venezuelan lawyer. You were imprisoned by the Venezuelan authorities. Firstly, let me ask you, what was behind that? Why did they put you in prison?
I was put in prison for trying to help the recollection of signatures for the recall election in 2016. And I just really want to comment that it's very important. Look at the contrast between the regime and interim President Guaido. On one side, you have the regime having these constant images with the military because that's all the regime has left, repression. On the other side, you have interim President Guaido, who is with the people, millions of people, asking for humanitarian assistance, trying to help the people. That contrast is very clear. And it's very important to say interim President Guaido didn't come out of anywhere. You know, I've known him since we were in college. He's a 35-year-old son of a taxi driver who has been a congressman since 2010. He's worked across the aisle with the opposition coalition, and he has a very strong voice, a voice that creates a new generation, and he is legitimate. And
let me ask you this very quickly. President Maduro is now offering elections. He's also offering dialogue with Juan Guaido.
He's offering elections, early parliamentary elections,
right,
which have to take place in 2020.
Yeah.
That is absolutely outside of the Constitution. And we have to remind viewers, why do we say President Guaido is legitimate? It is because in 2015, Democratic forces won 2/3 majority of the parliament. That election, even Maduro recognized. And now in 2019, what occurred was in 2018, there was not a legitimate presidential election. It wasn't recognized by 60 countries. What happened? There was a usurpation of power, but president and vice president were not acting. And what happened? Like any other democracy, we followed the Constitution. President Guaido, as president of the National Assembly, assumed under the Articles 233, 333, and 350.
So you're saying that Juan Guaido is the legitimate leader?
He is the interim president.
Interim president.
And I'll finish with this, and I'll ask, he's asking for one thing and one thing only, to lead the transition for free and fair elections. And this is something, by the way, President Guaido has been recognized by over 41 countries.
All right.
Most of Latin America, Australia, not just Western democracies, and that's very important to point out.
Max, what do you make of that?
Well, it's pretty clear that interim Wikipedia-recognized, Donald Trump-installed figures who have been put here in Washington are desperate to prove their legitimacy. But the question is, what do Venezuelans want? According to the polling firm Interlaces, over 80% of Venezuelans reject sanctions and U.S. intervention as a means of removing Maduro. Luis Vicente Leon, who is from Data Analysis, which is absolutely not a pro-government polling firm, it said that at best 20% of Venezuelans support the kind of agenda that's being put forward by the Popular Will Party of Juan Guaido and his real master, the aristocratic oligarch Leopoldo Lopez, who does not reflect the true face of Venezuela, and that's why he was consistently rejected. What Leon said is that they reject this party because they don't want war. They don't want to become another Libya or Syria in the Western Hemisphere.
Although the United States says that it is acting because of the economic crisis in the country, a crisis which has seen 3 million people leave the country, shortages of food, of medicines, other commodities in the country.
A crisis that it sought to encourage and compound by preventing Venezuela from restructuring its debt through massive sanctions, preventing Venezuela from exporting its own oil, preventing the Bank of England from returning $1.3 billion in gold assets to Venezuela. This is theft. This is piracy, and this is the agenda of Juan Guaido and Leopoldo Lopez and these figures. And I just want to say that I watched Carlos Vecchio, a figure who's been involved in violent destabilization and is wanted for arson in Venezuela, who posed alongside the killer of Liana Hergueta, a man who dismembered an innocent woman, and he posed for a photo alongside him. I saw Carlos Vecchio at the Atlantic Council before his.
That's a lie.
One moment.
I'll show you the photograph.
I'll get to you in a moment.
I'll show you the photograph. Carlos Vecchio was before his natural constituency here in Washington at the Gulf and Arms Industry funded Atlantic Council, and he announced his intention to privatize PDVSA, the Venezuelan oil company. That's why these figures have been put there. That's what Washington wants. This is not about democracy and human rights.
I want to bring Maria into this conversation. Maria, you interviewed President Maduro last month. This was before this crisis started, but did you get a sense that he was aware of what was going on in the country with what we see happening now?
Well, what I saw is that the president was desperate because I believe that he understands what's happening. And it's the first time in the 35 years of journalism that I have been covering Latin America, where I see that the United States, the gringos, and the Canadians, and the Brazilians, and the Europeans, and the Asians and the Arabs are all together, and they are all in the same boat, and they are repudiating the Maduro government, and they are siding with the opposition. That's what I saw. I saw a Maduro that understood that the bank account was dwindling, that he did not have the resources in order to feed his people, that he needed to continue paying or to giving some type of benefits to his armed forces in order to buy their loyalty. Maduro knows, understands, and the message that he sent through Fox News, that's the reason why he granted the interview to me, because he wanted to send a direct and powerful message to President Trump that he really wanted to negotiate. And when I said negotiate, I believe, even though he didn't say it on the interview, that he was willing to negotiate everything.
Yeah,
because
Maria,
reality is, as I said, the spirit of the times. This is the way I see it. It's the time, the tide has changed.
Maria, I hear what you say.
I think you gave a lot more time to other people, so I just want to finish my phrase. The spirit of the time in Latin America has changed, thank God for that. And it's the first time, I repeat, that the Latin Americans have said present and said, we're here to help you get rid of the communist regime. Because we know that President Maduro has been guided.
All right, my question to you, Maria.
By Cuba.
My question to you, Maria, is that I hear your point about the United States and Canada and European countries and possibly some Asian countries as well supporting Juan Guaido. But what kind of a precedent does it set when someone in a country gets up, says, I'm the new leader, proclaims himself to be the leader, and it's accepted by the rest of the world? Could this happen in any other country? Would it be acceptable?
Absolutely, and it's going to be acceptable because there is a constitution written by the Chavistas 10 years ago that says that if the president is not legitimate, then somebody has to fill that vacuum. And that vacuum needs to be filled by the National Assembly, which happens to be chosen by the people. Remember that this is nothing new. That President Maduro has been tinkering and and doing something with the elections in order to benefit him, but not necessarily it's at this type of process have been granted or have been blessed by the international community, because we do know that the Maduro government understands that if they do call for free and fair elections, they will lose them.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll have to see that. I want to go back to Ray Gomez in Caracas. Ray Gomez, this is what Juan Guaido said about Nicolas Maduro. Let's watch this.
Maduro does not protect Venezuela. He doesn't protect anyone's investments. So Venezuela is not viable for business, for countries. Why? Because there is a 2 million% inflation rate, because petroleum extraction has been reduced from 3.5 million to 1 million barrels a day. What most suits Russia and China is the country's stability and a change of government, not just for them, but for investors across the country, across all regions.
Ray Gomez, does Juan Guaido have a point there that the world is looking for stability in Venezuela? Would you accept that?
First of all, I would like to ask to the audience that is watching us, who was Juan Guaido before he self-proclaimed the president of this country? Who was he? In my opinion, Juan Guaido is the character in vogue for the right wing here in Venezuela and in the United States. Let's remember Enrique Capriles. Capriles has or had his time. He didn't make the objective that the opposition and the United States wanted to be accomplished here in Venezuela. Then came Leopoldo Lopez. He also had his time. And now it's Juan Guaido. Why so many so-called leaders of the oppositions, but the objective isn't yet accomplished? I mean, the objective of the solution of the crisis here in Venezuela, as they say. Why, if Juan Guaido is so, if he is so worried about the people of Venezuela, why didn't he think on humanitarian aid, as he says, before? Why did he wait until now? On the other hand,
because the government didn't allow him
Maria, let Ray finish.
That he's thinking on the military intervention. Doesn't he think on the peace of Venezuelans? Or Juan Guaido shares the opinion of some of the opposition people here in Venezuela who think that the bombs from the foreign army are only going to fall in the presidential palace, in Miraflores Palace. Nothing else is going to happen. For instance, here in Caracas, don't they see the news? Don't they read? Don't they see what happened, for example, in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq?
Okay, great. Francisco, you want to address some of those questions?
I just think it's funny how Max almost never going to Venezuela is a mouthpiece for a regime. And I'd like you to tell directly to people who have died from cancer, my friends who have been tortured by the Maduro regime, where you're telling them right now that their rights don't matter, that their voice doesn't matter. And that's very, very grave that you're here setting that right now.
You can say the same thing to the people that your crew has killed in Garimbas.
This is very incredibly important. The National Assembly, by unanimous vote, asked President Guaido to assume the interim presidency under articles of the Constitution. He was not self-proclaimed.
This is Ray, just a moment. Sorry, one moment. I'm going to have one of you at a time. Ray, 1 moment. Listen, I can only have one person at a time.
The biggest truth that needs to be repeated is that the National Assembly, under unanimous vote, the same National Assembly accepted by the defeat by the Maduro regime, asked President Guaido under articles of the Constitution to assume the interim presidency. That is why. That is why more than 45 countries recognize him as thus, and that is incredibly important. And I would like to say that years before, the National Assembly has asked for humanitarian assistance, unlike Maduro. Regime Maduro, very recently, has denied humanitarian assistance to the millions of Venezuelans who are suffering from malnutrition, and to the millions of Venezuelans, right now, actually it's in the 100,000s, who have HIV, 60,000 cancer patients who can't receive medicine.
Max a chance to respond to those questions you posed to him. Go ahead, Max.
Well, The issue is that Francisco is here not to talk to the Venezuelan people or to represent the Venezuelan people, but to talk to John Bolton and to talk to Donald Trump and to represent a hand of the empire in Venezuela. We're talking about the recolonization of Latin America, and this is a long-standing program. That's why John Bolton.
Been to Venezuela.
One moment.
How can he say he talks about the Venezuelan people?
Funny. You know what?
I was in prison and tortured by the Maduro regime.
I didn't
How
interrupt
can you say you talk to the Venezuelan people?
I didn't interrupt you, but you're here in Washington as a tool of Washington.
If you want to talk lies on TV,
okay, one
at
a time.
A responsibility
you are
from the
here.
Venezuelan
Okay, listen,
people
just
John
one at a
Bolton's
time,
to talk about
please.
the truth. And I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's just a fact.
You are here as
say
John
something?
Bolton's underpants.
Okay.
Listen, when you go to Venezuela and you see the pain that Maduro regime has suffered, then you can talk about Venezuela.
You can address the violence that your unpopular crew has caused in the Garimbas.
You're defending a government that does drug trafficking and is charged against crimes against humanity.
You are representing an unpopular group of the children of oligarchs.
You're on the wrong side of history here.
You've interrupted me constantly.
Okay, listen, we're gonna have one at a time. Max, finish quickly.
Okay, I didn't interrupt the underpants of John Bolton sitting to my left.
Okay, go ahead, very quickly.
Who is here in Washington on behalf of a government that has only been recognized by Wikipedia and an unpopular president in the United States. Now, what I wanted to say is that Juan Guaido, Leopoldo Lopez, and this so-called Generation 2007 has been trained by the United States since 2007 through the group OTPOR to destabilize Venezuela and undo a socialist experiment. And this is the culmination. And without the U.S., without the U.S. Air Force, without the U.S. sanctions, they would have nothing because Juan Guaido could not get elected to dog catcher in Venezuela on his own.
All right, I want to go to Maria. Maria, I want to come to you.
The opposition branch doesn't want to recognize that because they have a selective...
I'll get to you, Ray. Maria, go ahead.
I'm not Venezuelan,
Yeah.
so I don't have the same passions as the representative, Mr. Vecchio. I am Cuban American, and I have been watching what's happening in Venezuela for the last 20 years.
And you wanted to
one of the
do
guests
regime change
that
in
said
Cuba.
that, well,
Next.
and I think that that's past due. So what I'm saying is that it's sometimes the Latin Americans are very upset because the gringos and the Americans do not go in fast enough. These sanctions not to buy oil, which we call the nuclear option, that I believe that the United States should have probably imposed or take that decision not to buy oil or not to sell petrochemicals to the Venezuelans, for many people is pretty delayed. So when one of your guests is saying that the United States, is trying to invade in order to take the oil rigs and own PDVSA, I think that's a little bit late. Not only that, and number two, what you were saying before, your reporter in Caracas, he was saying about humanitarian aid. The humanitarian aid cannot come in because there is an apparatus, repressive apparatus established by the Cubans that has not allowed for that humanitarian aid to come in.
Maria,
don't you?
I'm rapidly running out of time. Ray wants to say something. Go ahead, Ray.
The humanitarian aid doesn't come to Caracas because the International Cross, for example, the International Red Cross hasn't admitted that. Why? Let's find out.
Okay, Francisco,
government,
if we look at the motives behind what the Americans are doing right now, is there something of a question mark over American motives? We've had John Bolton, and we've been talking about John Bolton. This is something that he said in an interview with the U.S. television network. He said, it'll make a big difference to the United States economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce oil capabilities in Venezuela. It would be good for the people of Venezuela. It would be good for the United States. We both have a lot at stake here, making this come out the right way.
This is actually very important for us. I would like to send a direct message to Beijing and the Chinese government. And I speak here on behalf of the new interim government. We're willing and able to accept and abide by all legal investments and contracts, all legal and constitutional contracts.
My question is,
that is to say that we are willing to work with every single nation that wants to properly invest, just like China, Russia, the U.S. have commercial relationships with Brazil, with Colombia, and Argentina.
Okay, let me finish
my question.
But
I'm trying to answer your question if you allow me.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Venezuelan and the new interim government has been very clear. We're willing to economically work with all nations that want to have a stable
But John
and normal
Bolton
and
is saying
regular
this is about
economy.
oil.
Listen, at the end of the day, you want to talk about oil. But
Yes.
what the truth is you have over 45 countries, including Spain, who's socialist, including Justin Trudeau,
Okay.
who no one can say he's from the right.
I didn't-
And
I
at the end of the day,
didn't-
what
yeah,
you
yeah.
want to, no, but this is very clear. What you want to make this about, that it's the U.S. versus some leftist regime in Venezuela.
Right.
What this is about is about democracy and dictatorial
I get
government.
your point. This is
So,
John Bolton saying this.
listen, at the end of the day, what you have to realize is
Yeah.
that Venezuela has, historically speaking, has accepted investment and oil sector work with many different countries. Right now, you have investments from U.S., right now, even with the Maduro regime, from China,
Chevron.
from Russia. What we propose is something very simple. We want to work with everyone,
Right.
as long as
Yeah.
they legally and constitutionally abide by what we describe as rule of law.
Are you not concerned by what
But
Bolton
you
is
know,
saying here?
let me
I'm
say
only
something.
concerned about the
I
freedom
think
of the
that-
Venezuelan people.
I think that
right
some
now,
of your guests
and
are
millions
not
of Venezuelans are
well-informed.
suffering.
Maria, I will get to you in a moment.
And let's not confuse
Yeah.
what's going on right now. Maduro has been charged with crimes against humanity.
Right.
Millions of Venezuelans have left because
Let's
of
put
hunger
that
and
aside.
hyperinflation. And what
Yeah.
we're really working for right here, after 4
All right.
months in prison,
All right.
is to help liberate the
We've
Venezuelan
got
people.
just a couple of minutes left. Max, is this about
Yeah.
oil?
It's also what
What
Marco
they-
Rubio said.
It's
Marco
not-
Rubio has
it's
said
not
that
about
this will
oil.
produce lots of jobs for Chevron. It's also what Juan Guaido has said. It's also what Carlos Vecchio, before his natural constituency at the NATO, Gulf and Arms Industry funded and oil industry funded Atlantic Council, said a few days
but
ago. It is about
unfortunately-
privatizing oil. This was written in the transition law
Yeah.
passed by the opposition-dominated
Where did he say he
National
privatized
Assembly.
oil? I
Yeah.
find the transcript.
yeah.
He's-
Find a single phrase where he
said-
said,
Okay.
I will privatize
I
oil.
found it and
That
I'm
is
quoting
not-
it directly.
Please,
You
please
see,
show,
you know,
show the network.
you
That is
know,
a complete lie.
interruptions
Yeah.
from a crumb on John Bolton's mustache notwithstanding, it is
Okay.
about oil and it's also
right.
about geopolitics.
And you serve a dictatorship.
It is about-
Congratulations, Max.
It is,
Congratulations.
You guys
it is also about
history
regime,
will
it
not
is
forget
also
what you did,
about
my
regime
friend.
change in
You guys
Cuba.
are
It is
losing
about
the
regime
perspective
change in
here.
Nicaragua and smashing any government that
Okay.
rejects Washington's
You have-
dictates.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
about
okay,
the
okay.
recolonization.
Maria,
The victims
of
will not
Latin
forget
Yeah,
what we did.
can I
Maria,
say
I've
something?
got 30 seconds, Maria. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, well, okay. You guys are, I think the focus that you are establishing here is completely wrong. PDVSA had for 20 years, Chavez and Maduro, they've had the oil industry in their hands and they have destroyed it. That's why Maduro had to sign an agreement with some of the American oil companies in order for them to bring in some of the technology and rescue their own disaster. If PDVSA would have done a good job and would have kept some of the
Right.
machines going, then they would not need
Okay.
or the Denmarks or the Russians or the Chinese or the Americans.
We gotta go
so
soon.
I don't know what you're saying, yes.
Okay, Ray, go
Thank you,
ahead.
Maria.
So what I'm saying is that you're talking about that Washington, I don't know, one of your guests is saying that Washington wants to invade and wants to profit from the oil rigs.
All right.
They had the opportunity for 20 years and
Maria,
look what they did.
Right, okay, I want to get to Ray Gomez. Ray Gomez, go ahead.
I would address it.
Can you hear me, Ray?
Yes, I can.
Go ahead.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. She said that for 20 years the Bolivarian Revolution had its opportunity. So she doesn't think on a blockade, on an external blockade, which victim has been the
What do you mean a
Venezuelan economy.
blockade?
Huh?
The United States is the number one
A blockade,
client
an
of this
economic blockade. So you
They
don't
don't
know
have-
that.
they don't
You
have
haven't
any
read
other
about that.
clients
Okay.
So you
like the
haven't
Americans.
seen any on that. Have you been here in Venezuela?
Okay,
For how long?
Ray.
For how long have you been here in Venezuela?
2 weeks ago, I was
Based
there.
on
What do you
what?
mean a
Have you
blockade?
speaking that 2 weeks
Yeah,
ago?
I'm
I've been
saying
here for
to you,
8 years.
The United States is the number
I've been
one
living here for
client
8 years.
All right, we have to go.
Years
We've
and
run
a
out of
half.
time.
client.
The blockade. the
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there.
external
Ray,
blockade
Maria,
from the United
we're going to
States
have to leave it
and
there.
the
Thank you.
governments allied.
All right. Thanks a lot. That's it. Thanks to all of you. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Arnold Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.